Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be giving you a tour of the Anvil Carrack. Now, I know at this point nearly everyone else has already done a video tour of this ship. So in order to keep things interesting, I'm going to focus in on more than just its physical makeup. And I'm going to be giving a lot of my opinions as to how this vessel stands up to the reputation that it was given. The one advantage to holding off and making this video after the ship's been out for a little bit is that I've already spent a lot of time flying it around. So at this point, most of my opinions are based on practical experience and less theory crafting on how this ship is going to perform after the bugs have been worked out of it. I also have some new discoveries to share with you when we get to the hangar bay portion of the tour. And one last thing, I'm going to be trying something new with this video, and as you've most likely already noticed, I'm recording it in true high def 4K 60 frames a second. And I'm going to be displaying it in its native 3440 by 1440 letterbox format. Let me know if you like it and if you want to see more videos being presented like this in the future. Making videos like this is a lot more costly in terms of rendering time and the hard drive space that it takes up, but I personally love the way the letterbox format looks, especially for videos like this, and I think it's worth the extra effort and the time that it takes to produce it. So if you like it, then definitely let me know in the comments section and I'll start making more videos that are presented in this format. So let's get on with the tour. Man, I can't believe that I actually used to think that this ship looks small from the CitizenCon demo. I'm going to start things out from the outside of the ship and work my way up one floor at a time. As of right now, there's only one way to get inside of it while you're on foot, and that's by clicking this button. It'll lower the ramp, and you're going to have to be a little patient with it because this ramp is slow to respond. This is the only downside that I see to having this being the only way to get into and out of the Carrack from. At least it is when you're not in space. And it's that this ramp is so slow to respond that someone could easily get on board during the time that it takes to lower and raise it again. Some people make it their business to go around sneaking aboard people's vessels and shipjack them once you get outside of an armistice zone. So security is kind of a big deal, especially when you're talking about a new ship like this. There's a button on the left side of the ramp that you use to close it again, and it takes a lot longer for it to close than it did for it to open. So just be patient with it and make sure to only click it once. When you're new to this ship and how it operates, it can be easy to think that you misclick the button and end up clicking it again, which in turn ends up lowering the ramp once again. To avoid this in the future, they really need to increase the response time of the ramp and decrease the amount of time that it takes for it to close. This area is referred to as the rover bay. It's meant to hold the Ursa rover that the Carrack comes with by default, and I found that it also can hold a large number of other vehicles and even some of the smaller ships. I'm going to briefly go over what some of the discoveries are that I've already come across. First, you can easily get two rovers into this bay and still have plenty of room while you're on foot to move around in between them. This allows you to have easy access to both the subdeck and the ramp. So having two rovers is a completely viable option when you're carrying vehicles. You can also carry 4 Cyclones. By restricting yourself to 4, you can park them so it's easy for both the driver and the passenger to be able to get out of the vehicle, fully move around it, and be able to get to wherever they want to go within the rover bay. I managed to get 6 into this space, but it's really cramped and difficult to get around when you end up doing this. Plus it increases the chances of you having collision issues when you're trying to exit the vehicles. I also wouldn't store them like this because the game really doesn't like it when you pack vehicles in this tightly and then try to store it. When you try to respawn it again, the vehicles are going to be all over the place. I managed to get 10 Noxes into here and to be able to space them out so I had enough room to get on and off each one of them, to be able to move around them, and to still be able to get to each one of the exits that leads out of the rover bay. I ended up getting a total of 5 Dragonflies into the rover bay. You can get a lot more of them in, but if you plan on safely transporting them, I'd recommend restricting yourself to carrying only 5 at a time. As you can see here, I did manage to get a lot more of them into this space, but at this point you might as well just be pigpiling them in. When you do this, they're not going to be stable for transport, and they'd most likely end up destroying each other and damaging the ship. And as a final note, the ballista does not fit into the garage. The vehicle bay has more than enough space for you to land a single Kruger into it. This includes both the Archimedes and the Merlin. And I've already demonstrated that you can also get 2 of either of these ships inside of it at the same time just as easily. But there's one addendum that I wanted to make to my If It Sits It Fits video when it comes to the Kruger, and that it's possible to get 3 of them inside the bay at one time. You just have to position them so that each one is facing in a different direction. The only thing that I could add to this is that I wouldn't store the Carrack when it's like this. The game doesn't like it when vehicles are too close to one another when you store the ship, and they have a tendency to not be in the same position that you left them in when you pull the ship again. You can also get a number of the other small vehicles into the rover bay as well. I'm not going to belabor this point too much, but going in order from easiest to the hardest to get into the bay are the Krugers, followed by the Razor, which is definitely the second easiest one to get in. Then the 85X, the M50, and the hardest one to get inside is without a doubt the Pisces, which just barely fits inside and takes a lot of finagling to get it in and back out again. Alright, I've already spent entirely too much time on the first room of the ship. On the left is a door that leads to the service ladder. And if you poke your head in and look up, you can see that it leads to the habitation and the technical deck. This is handy to have access to in case you ever had a power outage or in case the gravity ever cut out on you. Now, this is something that's right out of the Valkyrie, and its main purpose is to keep vehicles from ramming into the back wall, but could also double as cover that you could hide behind to repel shipjackers from. A friend of mine came up with that, and I thought it was a really clever alternative use for it. This is a lift that leads up to every floor but the cartography deck. That's the cargo bay, which we will get back to in a second. This way leads to the docking collar, which can double as an EVA hatch. It has places for you to store your EVA gear and armor, and it has a locker that you can stow additional items in. And through the magic of editing, we are now in space. I found this to be the handiest way to get into and out of the ship when you're in space, and it's a much preferred alternative to using the ramp. So next we're going to head into the cargo bay. The ship has 3 detachable cargo pods that holds a combined total of 456 SCUs worth of cargo. That breaks down to 132 SCUs each. To put that into perspective for you, each individual pod can carry more than a Freelancer Max can hold. At one point a dev said that each pod could just barely fit a ballista into it, but he didn't say if that accounted for having the lift in there or not. Judging on past experiences, I would say probably not. But I'm going to continue to keep deluding myself into secretly believing that it can fit one in there until proven otherwise. Even if it doesn't end up being able to fit a ballista or even a Nova tank, you should still be able to haul a fair amount of additional ground vehicles in here. The last 2 pods are exactly the same, so I'm going to continue along the catwalk until we get out of this area. This intersection leads to the aft elevator, the armory, and continues to lead on to the belly turret. First off, I'd like to say that I love the fact that this ship even has an armory. It was one of those things that I'd always hoped they would end up coming with way back to when this ship was still in early development. The only criticism that I have for it is that for the amount of space that we're dealing with, the armory seems kind of sparse and limited in the amount of gear that can be stored here. It has the appearance that the blast doors can close and section this area off, making it a good defendable position to fight back from if this ship was ever boarded. But it's hard to tell if this is going to be something that we'll actually be able to do, or is this just greebling? This corridor and the one that's located on the other side of the elevator both lead to the rear turret. It's a carbon copy of the one that you'd find in the Valkyrie. And my only complaint for this space is that it's practically empty with the exception to the turret itself. The good thing is that this is the best designed belly turret in the game right now. Some ships like the Constellation allows the gunner to remain sitting upright in their seat, but their visibility is horrible. While ships like the Retaliator have fixed this issue by literally flipping the gunner upside down. Which when you're in space where everything is relative, it isn't much of an issue, but it can be really disorientating when you're flying planetside. The Carrack's turret is just like the Valkyrie's, which allows the gunner's seat to rotate along with the gun so that you have a clear view of the target regardless of where you're aiming. I'm going to leave this area through the opposite corridor that we came in from just so you can get a chance to see everything. And I'm going to click on every point of interest that I can along the way. This is the aft elevator, and it's the only one that can access all 4 decks. It's also a great showcase for their new building block tech that they use to create its interactive buttons. The only complaint I have with it is that this would have been the perfect elevator to use to go all the way down to the surface with. This would have created an alternate way to enter the ship from other than having to use the ramp. It already extends through the entirety of the ship, and there's nothing located beneath the subdeck that would have prevented them from doing this. Okay, so now we're on the habitation deck. Each of those two corridors that I just looked down both lead to the same area. They wrap around and bring you to the front of the medical bay. I'm going to save that corridor for later. That door leads to the access ladder, which goes back down to the garage. And this is the entrance to the medical bay. The medical bay has been slightly altered from its original concept. It now has 3 medical beds instead of 5. 2 of them are tier level 3, just like the Cutlass Red has, which are good for healing minor injuries. And the 3rd bed is tier level 2, which can be used for healing more serious injuries. There's also a storage room and a doctor's office located in this area. The storage room looks like it can hold a variety of perishables, supplies, extra crates, and samples from both flora and fauna, and to be able to keep them stored here for an extended period of time. And apparently the Carrack also comes with a lifetime supply of needles and rubber gloves, so have fun with that. The doctor's office provides a hermetically sealed environment that you can oversee the tier 2 bed from, and this is most likely going to be where the controls for it are going to be located. It should be noted that you can only get the option to heal if you're injured. A lot of people mistakenly thought that this feature is broken because they didn't see this option appear for them when they were lying down in the bed, but it does work. You just have to be hurt first. Otherwise, this option won't appear for you. Currently, the tier 2 level bed can not only heal, but it can also act as a spawn point that you'll return to if your character is reduced to 0 hit points. You can set this bed to be a spawn point by lying down on the bed and clicking on the Set as Preferred ICU option. You can also unselect this bed by clicking on the Clear as Preferred ICU option. Being able to use this ship as a spawn point is an incredibly useful feature to have access to, particularly at this point in the game's development. And on more than one occasion it saved me from having to go all the way back to Alisar because of some random bug that got me fatally stuck or killed for no reason. And that's the hatch that leads down to the access ladder and back down to the garage. And this is the same lift that I showed you before at the start of the tour. I'm going to take my first right and head into the crew's quarters. The first thing that you're going to come across when you enter the crew's quarters is this central rec room. So far, its only furniture is an oddly shaped pool table, which I'm sure is going to be used as the excuse for anyone who ever misses a shot while playing on it. Stupid hexagon. I'd be kicking your ass right now if we're playing on a regulation table. I'm telling you, I can already hear it. This area also acts as a hub that connects the bathroom to where the bunks are located. This is the bunkhouse. It's got 5 beds, 2 of which are bunks, and the last one's a standalone that's been recessed into a wall. It has 1 locker for each bed, and has a little couch for you to sit at. This room has an interesting lighting scheme where it's not quite as well lit as the mess hall, but it's a lot more brightly lit than the outside corridors that you'd find in the rest of the ship, which gives it a kind of sleepy time somber quality that's a direct contrast to how the other rooms of the ship feel. Now, the shower area provides everything that the crew's going to need to get up and start their daily routine. Other than that, there's not really much to say about it. I can appreciate how the bathroom and the showers have been separated from one another, and I'm sure that the crew will learn to appreciate it too, especially after taco night. Other than that, it's the bathroom, man. There's not much to say about it. Alright, it's mess hall time. And I realize it's kind of a bad transition to go right from the bathroom to the mess hall, but, you know, whatever. The mess hall seems like it's going to be the main social gathering area for the ship. It's going to be a necessary part in keeping the player's actor status system in check, and is one of the more well-lit areas that really has the ability to lighten up the oppressive mood that a lot of the rest of the ship has. Just look at it. This room feels like Kane could fling himself onto the table at any moment and have a xenomorph pop out of his chest. And this is right out of the first Alien movie in a very nostalgic way that I approve of. This is a little Easter egg from the devs that you can pause and read if you want, or you could check it out on your own next time that you're in a Carrack. This is the first thing you'll come across when you enter the captain's quarters. It has a very typical office-looking layout. The desk is slightly elevated to give it that touch of authoritarianism, and I like the window that's been set up right behind it so that the room can be bathed in natural lighting. Overall, it seems like a nice addition for people who are going to like to roleplay as the captain. The next room is where the captain's bunk is located. It also has a locker and some extra storage space, and it has its own private bathroom. The last point of interest on the habitation deck is the lower bridge. When you first walk into here, you'll immediately come across a service elevator on your left that goes to the upper bridge. And then you'll walk through a row of server racks to get to the main area of the flight deck. You can also access a number of components from within this room as well. The flight deck has 3 stations in it. The center seat is the pilot's, and flanking it are the co-pilot seat and a support station. Well, that is going to be it for this floor. Let's take the elevator to the upper deck and see what kind of things it's going to have to offer us. The upper deck has a gunner's seat, a support station, the hologlobe, and a standing command station. The command station has limited functionality when compared to the pilot seat, but it's got a lot better view. The gunner's seat controls the remote turret which is located on the top of the ship. When you first step onto the bridge, the gunner's seat is going to be the one that's located to the right of the hologlobe. And this is where the escape pods are located. The repair room is going to be a place where you can fix damaged components and hopefully weapons and other personal items. This is the drone room, which I really look forward to being able to go into more detail about after it's been brought online. For now, you can check out the Q&A about the Vulcan if you want to know more about how drone gameplay mechanics are going to work. Drone gameplay is one of the most anticipated features for ships like the Carrack, the Vulcan, the Orion, and the Reclaimer, so I really hope that it's given the proper amount of attention when they do finally develop it out. It's going to have a lot of potential gameplay associated with it, and it's going to greatly increase the abilities of these ships in a lot of different ways. This is that same elevator that goes back down to the habitation level in the subdeck. And this is the other end of the access ladder that I showed off when I was back in the garage. This is the scout bay where the Pisces is normally stored. There are a number of things about the scout bay that I want to talk about. First, someone was saying that the Aurora LN couldn't fit into the scout bay, and it can, even with the larger missile rack and the fuel scoop. It fits, you can close the hangar doors on it, and if you store the ship and recall it, the Aurora will still be in the bay and it can be flown out of the hangar without any issues. Another thing is that I was able to get 3 Krugers parked into this space. You just have to be careful when it comes to what order you land them in and when you take off again. Doing this, as always, comes with my usual caveat, where I wouldn't store the Carrack with these ships parked like this. The game really doesn't like it when you place ships this close to one another. But if I would have turned my Carrack into a mini Kraken, then I'd go ahead and pile in the Krugers just like this. A very commonly asked question I've gotten was about the MPUV, and I'm happy to say that both the personnel and the Argo cargo can fit within the scout bay. In fact, it can hold 2 of them at once. When the hangar doors close, they will compact the MPUV's landing gear down a little bit, but it'll be safe to travel and you can store them in the Carrack and pull it again with a pair of MPUVs in the bay without it causing any issues. One other thing that I want to talk about is, after I posted the If It Sits It Fits video, I was inundated with questions as to whether or not certain other ships could also fit into the scout bay. If you really want to know about some particular ship, you can check that info on the ship matrix and compare it to the Pisces. If it's bigger than the Pisces, then it's not going to fit. There's only going to be 2 exceptions to this. The first is the Buccaneer, which will fit into the scout bay if you angle it in, it sits, you can shut the hangar doors behind it, and it's going to be safe to quantum travel with. The other one is the Arrow, which is in a really weird place right now. If you have the landing gear down, then its wings will fold up, which will keep it from being able to close the hangar doors. If you keep the wings down and the landing gear retracted, it'll still fit, and you'll be able to close the hangar doors. It'll bounce around a little bit while quantum traveling, but it'll survive through without any damage. Just make sure to not store the Carrack while the Arrow is in the hangar bay. When you pull the ship again, even if the Arrow's landing gear was down when you stored it, it'll spawn in the bay with its wings up and its gear extended. If you try to open the bay doors, it'll cause a fatal problem with the ship, most likely ending with the Arrow exploding or clipping almost entirely into the ship. In the future, we're supposed to be able to independently operate the wings from the landing gear, but they've been saying that since before the 2.6 build. But after that option becomes a thing, we should be able to safely store the Arrow in the Carrack scout bay. Now, I'm not going to go over every ship in the roster, but I do want to address some of the ships that I was most commonly asked as to whether or not they could fit into the scout bay. This included the 300 series, which were all just too big to fit inside. The Prospector was surprisingly just a little too big in terms of its length and width, but even if it did manage to be able to sit, it would still be too tall for you to close the bay doors. All the Avenger series won't fit. It would have before the rework, but it does not now. The Hawk was also just a little too big for the scout bay. No matter how I tried to angle it, this ship just would not sit. Even if it did, that pterodactyl head would stick out too much. The Terrapin was also a very close call, but in the end those VTOL thrusters stuck out just too much to get him inside. The Blade seemed like it had the most promise since its wings can scissor in like they do, but it's too big for the scout bay even with the wings folded. And finally, the Gladius's wingspan and its body length is just big enough to keep it from getting inside of the bay. I don't think there's too many things left in this floor to take a look at. So far I believe it's just the side turrets and the engineering section, and that's it. I absolutely love the way they did this fish tank view of the scout bay. Very, very nice addition. Don't worry, I'm not skipping the turrets. I just want to call the elevator. The Carrack side turrets are my favorite in the game. The Hammerhead may have power on its side, but these turrets have style. And you can't tell me that they don't completely emulate the ones that you'd find on the Millennium Falcon in all the right ways. Like, to the point where every time I destroy a ship while using this turret, I expect someone to turn around and say, "Great kid, don't get cocky." I found that the turrets have great overlapping fire. They're just powerful enough for what you need them for, which is mostly for taking on smaller and medium-sized ships. I just don't like the default options for the dorsal and the ventral turrets. I wish they all came with rhinos. This vessel is such an amalgamation of classic Star Wars ships. It has TIE Fighter wings, Millennium Falcon turrets, and it looks like Darth Vader's personal decorator gave this deck the once-over. And what else do we have left? Oh yeah, the engineering room. Let's go hit there next. I think it'd be better if we go here first. If I save it for last, I know I'm going to forget about it. And this whole area overlooks the engine room. And that's the gravity generator. I tend to look in every direction when we enter a new room, just to give you an idea of where we are. This looks like a good place to have a short pause and take it all in. This has got to be one of the best looking engine rooms that I've seen so far. It has just the right vibe going. It really gives off that stuck in the bowels of the ship kind of feel, but it still has enough room to move about in it and to get to where you need to go. It's got a service ladder and an elevator on either side of the room, and has easy access to most of the ship's components. Easy access if you know where to stand, that is. It has 2 floors to it, and no, let's not take the ladder. Let's use the lift and go below deck in style. This is where the rest of the components are. And if you want to know which one is which, just look at the ground in front of it. Everything's pretty well labeled here. Oh, and here's something that a lot of people miss their first time through. Flanking either side of the lift are 2 doors that lead to the coolers and the fuel tanks. And that just leaves the cartography deck to take a look at, and it's the smallest one on the ship. And I will be heading out of here in the opposite direction that we came in from. And that door leads to where the other side turret is located. This ship has been built like a tank. It's got 2 large shields, but they feel beefy even for large ones. And you can't ram this ship with anything less than a hammerhead or an 890 jump. And I gotta say, it is very satisfying to watch griefers just bounce right off the front of this ship. Alright, here we go, last deck. Next to the drone room, this is the one that I'm looking forward to the most for them to bring to life. I'm really hoping that they allow us to expand the hologram out past the confines of the railing so that it fully covers the entire room, allowing you to actually walk through the various elements that make up the system that you're currently looking at, and to be able to interact with it from all sides. That feature is going to really help to bring exploration to life. And once again, gotta look everywhere. Just like a cat walking into a new room. The rest of this deck consists of a few escape pods and storage for your EVA gear. But other than that, there's not really much to it. Door. More doors. Now, this is a good vantage point to watch ships enter the scout hangar from. It's also a fast way for you to be able to get down to the technical deck, as I'll demonstrate. You can also EVA your way down into here and not hurt yourself. At least you shouldn't if you do it right. If you go full speed and hit it like a bug hitting a windshield, yeah, you will hurt yourself, but, you know, take it easy is all I'm saying. And that's going to conclude this tour of the Carrack. Thanks for watching, and take care.